I'm Darian Fleming, and thank you for joining me on Get What You Need and Feel Good About It. Do you find it difficult to ask for what you need? Do you frequently feel misunderstood? Do you have a problem or cause that you would like to learn to manage more effectively? What makes it so hard for us to tell each other how we feel? And how do we speak up for ourselves so we get what we need and feel good about it? How do we do this respectfully so that we honor the needs and feelings of others? Together, we'll explore tips, strategies, and resources that, when used mindfully and consistently, will improve our results and enrich our relationships. Hello and welcome back to Get What You Need and Feel Good About It. I am Darian Fleming, your hostess. And today I'm excited to welcome back Sara Waggle, who was with us in April, talking about accepting the different parts of ourselves. Today, we are going to talk about breaking up with victimhood. Welcome, Sara. It's so good to have you back.
Thank you so much, Darian. I am so excited. This is one of my favorite topics, breaking up with victimhood. I love talking about this. Not everybody likes this conversation. I do.
I just want to remind people a little bit about your background. So, Sara is an astrologer, a personal development coach, and a mentor. She focuses on self-acceptance, breaking up with victimhood, and wellness. Sara got into astrology after years of personal development work and found that she had even more questions about herself. Now, Sara implements astrology with personal development coaching with clients to help them reach self-acceptance and really become who they want to be in the world. In her spare time, she enjoys reading, crocheting, and good food, good coffee, and good tea. And what a great way to spend your spare time. I happen to know too that Sara is writing a book called The Aquarius Experiment, which will be coming out, and I hope to have you back to talk about that book when you're ready to talk
Yeah,
about that.
definitely. Definitely.
But Sara, tell us how you got into the business of exploring what it means to be in a victim mentality and how you decided that that was something you really wanted to focus on.
Well, I feel like, as with anything else, I didn't like with astrology, I didn't set out to be an astrologer. Same with victimhood coaching, is I didn't seek it out. It found me. And I kind of want to back up just a little bit and distinguish the type of victim mentality that we're talking about here, because I think most people, when they hear the word victim, they think victim of a crime, or victim of, an event or whatever. And yes, that's part of it, but we're actually talking about the mindset of being in victim, or victimhood, as I like to call it. But victim mentality, meaning, life happens to you. These circumstances happened to you. And, you are therefore then at effect of those circumstances. So you can't get where you want to get in life because of your childhood, because of, because of this, because of that relationship. You know what I'm saying? So we're, or you have this limitation. Heck, we can all be victim to being disabled and we don't have the resources, right? But there's, people who have all of the same limitations that you have, that I have, that anyone else listening has, and they're still, succeeding at whatever they set out to succeed at. So we are talking here about like the victim mentality of, I can't get where I want to get because of fill in the blank with whatever your circumstances are. And so how I really got into this was I got called out. I was I was in my coach's training program. This was back in 2017, and I don't remember what I said, but I remember that my peer that was sitting next to me sort of chuckled and said, "You're so victim, you don't even know how victim you are." And I'm like, "What? What does that even mean?" I didn't realize that I was playing the victim role, that I was stuck in my own victimhood, that I was, I couldn't make my payments. I couldn't be a successful coach. I couldn't do fill in the blank because I was blind, because I, couldn't read the assigned reading, because I couldn't go get a waitressing job. You know what I'm saying? Like I was stuck
Mm-hmm.
in the loop of being a victim. And so that's the first time it showed up for me. And then further along in 2019, I attended a couple of ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics group. I never did the 12 steps, but I attended a few meetings just to see what the experience was about. And there was a person that was sharing and said the exact same thing, is I didn't realize how victim I was until it was pointed out to me. And I think that's where a lot of people don't get it, right? They and I didn't want to see my own victim mentality, that life was happening, to me, life was happening to me. I was faced with, abusive relationships. I was faced with visual limitations. I was faced with all of these things. And it took diving into very intense coaching and therapy to really see how badly I was playing my own victim game. And then I started challenging myself to break out of it. And that's where things started to really shift. But so I didn't seek out victimhood coaching. It found me, just like astrology, just like everything else that I feel like I've studied, most of what I've studied and mentored and supported people over the years is things that have found me.
I think sometimes we can set a lot of goals and be goal driven if we know what we want to do, but things do find us. I remember in graduate school, the instructors wanted me to study vocational rehabilitation counseling,
Mm-hmm.
and I rebelled. I said, I am not going to be put, just because I have a disability doesn't mean that's my calling.
Yep.
And so I didn't do it. And in the long run, eventually I got a job being part of a team at the Oregon Commission for the Blind, and people were thanking me and telling me that they really appreciated what I was bringing to the table. And I thought, why did I fight it all these years? How do people end up finding themselves d- playing that role and find themselves in the mindset of being a victim?
Um, I mean, with anything with personal development, there has to be an awareness about it. And a lot of people don't want to become aware of it because then they have to do something about it. So it's better if they, it's better if they turn the other way. I don't want to see that this is something I can do something about, because then I have to do something about it. Right. I have to take
Right.
responsibility. I have to, take action. And it's very common in many cases, per your story that you just told, like about what not wanting to do vocation rehab counseling. That's very common that people don't want to do what's perfectly in alignment for them, because it takes work, because it,
Mhm.
you know, it's there's also like that air of like, a lot of people like to be in dissatisfaction because that gets them attention, and then they don't have to take any act. Again, this all comes back to, they don't have to do anything different. So it's easy to stay in the victim mindset. And many of us are there. Look around the world. Lots of people are in a victim mindset. It's very evident. And the more I do this work, and the more I, work to like remedy or clear myself of my victim mindset, the more it's very evident in other people. And I catch myself in it too. So I mean, don't act like I'm completely healed from this, because I don't think that'll ever happen. But when you sit in victim mindset, you don't have to choose. You don't have to make it go differently. You get to sit and stew and complain and, I can't, and all of these self-deprecating, phrases, and what, you don't have to do anything different. You get to sit in the victim mindset because you can't do anything about it.
Let's face it, things do happen to us that we don't have control over.
Yes.
Like, I didn't have control over being 2 years old and getting croup and waking up with significant visual and physical disabilities.
Circumstances will always happen to us, right? We are always going to experience life because that's what we're here to do, is live life, right? However,
Mhm.
I feel like, so for me, how that showed up is, as an adult who's legally blind, who's visually impaired, my family doesn't understand why I do life differently, right? I lived in my family's small little town that they love. They were all born there, raised there. Many of them still live there. But for me, I hated living there. There was no transit. There was, it was a hard time making friends because everyone, who does live there was born and raised there. So they had their own little cliques going on. And so for me to function and do life was very challenging, of course. But I could not convince, however you'd like to word that, my family that that wasn't working for me.
Mhm.
And it took me showing them, um, by saying, by basically texting my family every time I needed to go somewhere, like, I need to go to the store, I need to go do this, I need to go do that, and them saying, no, no, no. And eventually they all came around to, you can't stay here, can you? I said, no, no, I can't. I have to move. And I did move. And now I have buses. And boy, the freedom of having buses and or any type of transit, at my fingertips, basically, to do my adulting and get my responsibilities taken care of, is hugely different. And there's an air of freedom there. Um, so we won't always convince our closest family members that we need things differently. And the phrase was coming up as you were talking about, like, your trauma, your experiences are not your fault, but they are your responsibility to overcome. So yes, I have, many of your listeners have at least one limiting disability. Most of us probably many limiting disabilities. And it's not our fault that we have those. It is, however, our responsibility to overcome them, or at least maybe not so much overcome, but find ways of pivoting, adapting, accepting that this is how you need something done because of your disability, right? I like things labeled and organized a certain way because it works for me. And because I live alone, I don't have to worry about who that's affecting, right? Whereas other people may live with other people, and therefore how they need things organized may affect other people. But that's when communication needs to be a thing. And you have to be your own best advocate, not a victim of, well, I can't because the other person living in my household doesn't like it that way. But you, as a disabled person, has to be the louder voice in the room, so to speak, to say, but I need it this way because I'm blind. I actually once lived with a woman, severely ADHD, with very poor organizational skills. And um, she would change the layout of the kitchen. In other words, like not put utensils in the same drawer twice. And I would just have to call her into the room and be like, I need to find the veggie peeler or whatever I was looking for that day. And she'd have to hunt it down. So we all get to deal with fun things like that. So
What have you found to be helpful?
I love this question because I have like a perfect example. So my family, which I have a very big family on both sides, but I mostly hang out with my mom's side of the family. But we have large gatherings where it's not just my family, but there'll be, neighbors that come by and whatever. And, so we're having cookouts and we've got the grills outside and we've got all the condiments and sides inside, right? So you've got this lighting situation where you've got the indoor lighting, but the outdoor lighting is completely different. And for me, that's like the hardest for me to function and is to, in lighting changes and whatnot. And it got to the point where I wanted to help, whether it was help set up or help bring everything in, help, with something. And eventually I just sat my family down and I said, I want to help. I don't want to look like the person who's not helping. And we had to talk about it. What could I do to be helpful, to be a part of the social event that's going on, the cookout that's going on, without being in the way, without dropping and spilling things that don't need to be dropped and spilled. And so we had conversations about it, and my aunt just said, and my uncle just said, just remind us that we need to assign you a task. And typically that meant that I was doing dishes, but at least I was in a specific part of the room that I wasn't going to be in the way. And I was helping get something done, which the dishes was important, right? Um,
Mhm.
Other times it would be, we need you to put all of these, items into, to go containers for people to take home or put in the fridge or whatever. So you kind of just have to be your best advocate because otherwise, yes, you look like the person who's like, okay, where's the bowls and where's the this and where's the that. But if you actually ask your family, what chore can I be doing so that I'm helping? Even if that means that you're in one place, but then you're at least in one place doing your assigned or chosen task for that situation, but you're also not in the way. You're not changing lighting if you can see lighting, so that you're risking bumping into people, dropping, you're not doing that task. You're letting people who are sighted do those tasks. Um, and so you kind of have to be your own best advocate about it. And, we get in that victimy mindset of, well, I couldn't help because I didn't know what to do. You also didn't ask what you could be doing to help. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So you got to look at it and sit down and have those conversations with your family. Families are like the last people to understand what you're truly experiencing in life. My friends totally got it before my friends got it or before my family got it. So,
Right. Well, and this is actually to reframe this, needing to have those conversations, if we can reframe it, can be seen as empowering
yes,
rather than saying, I can't because I'm this. We're actually saying, I can, and here's how.
yes,
And it changes the experience. I know that there's other ways that we can find ways to fit in to our social networks and
mm-hmm,
such by showing what we can do. When I was going to church, I decided I was going to listen to the announcements about what was needed. And when I heard about something I could do, I would go volunteer myself.
mm-hmm,
And and then I started being sought out for those things.
Yeah.
And not only did I get to be helpful, but I made friends in a very real way because I was participating,
Yeah.
and they they started to forget that I had disabilities, and they started to remember I don't like making the phone calls. I'm not the one that wants to schedule. Let's call Darian. So,
Yes, absolutely. I'm a firm believer that we all have some way of contributing in social, in society in general. Like I firmly believe that. I firmly believe that there's people that, we're talking about like publishing my book and like, we were talking about like audio editing and whatnot. And there's people that can do those things. There's people that are really good at doing those things. I'm not one of those people. I don't need to be one of those people, right? So I'm going to hire an editor to edit my manuscript, to fix all of my grammar things, to fix all of the wrong words and, to point out to me that this doesn't flow and, whatnot. And then there's the layout person. I'm not going to do those things. I don't want to do those things, right? Similar to
mhm,
what you're saying, your church group doesn't want to make the phone calls, but Darian, you enjoy making the phone. Go right on ahead. You know what I mean?
right.
I promise you, when you say what you are able to do and come out of the woodwork and offer your support, you will get support in return, right?
Hmm.
I used to volunteer at a food pantry in my previous town, and the food pantry was legit a half a block away from where I lived, which sounds very easy. And I was able to walk to it on most occasions. But then, the snow, I mean, I live in the Midwest. So the snow, the ice, the frigid temperatures, and I literally could not walk to the food pantry. But because the people enjoyed having me there, yes, these people would drive around the corner to bring me
Hmm.
safely to the food pantry because everyone enjoyed having me there. And I was somebody they could get, because we had people who lived in the country who couldn't always get into town. And so, you know, you get the support because you've offered your support. So it is a two-way street. And that then becomes things are happening for you, right? You're getting to experience connecting with friends at church. I'm getting to experience connecting with people at the food pantry because I've offered my support, you've offered your support, and they're in turn going to. So then things are happening for you, right?
Right. And I think we're talking about a couple of things here that I want to
Mm-hmm.
touch on a little more deeply. The first one is codependence. And whether we have disabilities or not, I know a lot of people who have no visible disabilities that struggle with codependence. And we did have
Mm-hmm.
an episode about codependence that was when I interviewed Abigail Gasta.
Yep.
And people in our lives, whether we have disabilities or not, sort of get locked into their own ways of navigating. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they don't always complement each other. And when we have challenges, like I do, like you
Mm-hmm.
do, like
Mm-hmm.
many of our listeners do, it's a it's a dance to try to break that habit of codependence. How have how have you done that, Sarah? Broken that habit of codependence?
Well, and I haven't listened to that episode in quite some time, but just knowing Abigail the way that I do, I would say that it's an interdependence that we want to shift to, right? We are here to not simply from the disability perspective, it's very easy to be codependent, right? Because we are dependent on other people. But I think like what we're talking about with the whole support back and forth, that's an interdependence. Your church is depending on you to make the phone calls, and in turn, you're dependent on the church to connect with other people. Same with the food pantry,
Mm-hmm.
right? I am dependent on the food pantry because I enjoy volunteering and I was also getting food there, but they're dependent on me to be there to volunteer, so that they can be doing other tasks. And I did have a specific task that I did at the food pantry. So I didn't have to, again, move around the room while there was,
Mm-hmm.
50 other people moving around the room. So it's an interdependence. It's we each need each other. We each need to depend on each other, right? Where codependence is more of you can't function at all without that other person to validate you or, do the things for you. Whereas interdependence, we each have something to bring to the table to offer the situation. And I think that a lot of people with disabilities, now quote me if you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I feel like a lot of people with especially physical limiting disabilities tend to think that they have to be reliant on other people because they feel like they don't have something to offer in return. So they get in that codependence loop as opposed to shifting it to, yes, you are dependent on your caregivers, your family, your people to drive you, your people to do this, but you also have something to offer them in return, even if it's gas money. That's still an interdependent loop.
Right. Eh, For me, I think I'm getting there. I understand these concepts. I think it's even harder sometimes for our families, for example,
Mm-hmm.
who at some point realized I have to be part of her support system. And it's hard for them to let go and let us be our true selves.
I was very hesitant to move back home anyway because I knew what I was getting myself into. But I did it to support my mom, who needed me at the time. So it was necessary. It was a necessary move when it happened. I think it was getting to the point where I was surviving okay because my brother and my sister-in-law were supportive, and my sister-in-law would help me get where I needed to get when I needed to get there. But then when they moved away, it was kind of this realization of like my aunt, my cousins were like, we will help your mom, we will support your mom, you need to go do your life the way you need to do it. So, and my mom fully supported me moving, so I had full support. Now I had lived in that town for like 2.5 years, and so they all kind of saw what it was like for me having to get groceries, having to get to the bank, the simple things that I couldn't do independently because I lived in such a small town. So I think it just they understood it after a while of just the whole thing, like the things that they could do on a daily basis or on a regular basis, I couldn't do. I had their full support to leave by the time I was moving away. So I was actually really grateful because I did get that 2.5 years to be around my family for them to actually see what my life was like. Because I think we don't get it, right? I've lived away from home for 30 years. I've lived in different cities, had public transit, had friends, had, whatever I needed resource wise. And I think they just didn't realize that until I lived in their town. And I think that they just saw it. They just finally saw it like, oh, you actually like not driving really sucks.
And so realizing what our gifts are, I don't you think that's one way to help us reset our mindset?
I think so. I mean, for me, like a lot of the shifting started when I literally just changed the podcast I was listening to. It was really kind of that simple. I think I absorbed it by osmosis. But I started listening to like military podcasts. Jocko Willink, for example, who's a former Navy SEAL, right? And Jocko's philosophy is discipline equals freedom, which meant jack crap to me for the longest time. Um, but just shifting like how I went up, because you can look at these limitations and you can let them consume you. or you can do things regardless of the limitations,
Right.
right? Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Like
Yeah.
like I've since been hiking mountains in 4 different states. When I thought there's no way I could hike a mountain. I'd fall. First of all, I'm from the Midwest. I'd fall off a cliff. That's the like literally. It's an ongoing joke within me climbing mountains. Is I have this. I'm from Illinois, so like it's flat in Illinois, and so whenever I climb mountains, there's like this ongoing joke that I'm constantly in fear of falling off a cliff. Um, I've never been at risk for that, by the way. um, but I couldn't have imagined, hiking mountains, and now I've done it in 4 different states. And
Yeah.
it's easy to say, like, the navigation, the terrain, the depth perception that I don't have, and it's easy to say that, like, I'm blind and I can't do that. It's also a lot harder to say I'm going to do it anyway. And I did do
Mhm.
it anyway. And I did have support. I did have sighted people. There's no way I'd go do it by myself. If I knew, maybe if I had a trail that like I knew and it was roped and I could follow my own, marked lines or whatever. But, I wouldn't just go randomly hike a trail. So, it's I think we can get really stuck in our own limited thoughts of what we can and we can't do. And society doesn't make it any easier by giving us, you know, labels after labels after labels, you know, of which is further, to me, that further limits our own mindsets, that we
Mhm.
have these labels. And I'm going to try not to mention any of them specifically, but I think that you understand what I'm talking about.
Right.
And so there again, you get to dig your heels in on being a victim. You can't because you have this label or that label. And sure, you have those things, but those, when we get into the whole idea of those defining who we are, versus, yeah, I have that thing, but I'm still going to do, I'm still going to write a book, and I'm still going to climb mountains, and I'm still going to travel, be a nomad, which I was for like 3 years.
Hmm. Well, so we're really talking, I think, about moving towards what are the tools at our disposal to help us adapt our mindset and help us really be part of our own solution. And we've talked about how circumstances do come up for
Mm-hmm.
us. And I just want to refer back to a couple of my previous podcast episodes. So I teach the happy for no reason
Mm-hmm.
model developed by the authors of the book Happy for No Reason, 7 Steps to Being Happy from the Inside Out. And they define happy for no reason as a state of inner peace and well-being that is not dependent on our circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all come up against our circumstances every day. And one of the tools that they suggest, they call the blame, shame, complain game.
Mm-hmm.
And they define the fast track to unhappiness or victimhood is
Mm-hmm.
blaming, shaming, and complaining.
Uh-huh.
Blaming is what we do to someone else. Shaming is what we do to ourselves. And complaining, it's toxic. It
Yes.
it 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 defines our negative mindset if we allow ourselves to stay there. And we talk about emotional contagion. When
Mm-hmm.
we do that, it rubs off on people around us and they challenge us to actually challenge our families or ourselves or groups of coworkers to play this blame, shame, complain game. And you can do it by put coming together and everybody has like $21 bills, or you can use quarters. I had a client use toothpicks. But when you notice that you are complaining or shaming yourself or blaming someone else, you have to put $1 in the bowl on
Mm-hmm.
in your kitchen, on your table, wherever it is, because it is a visual representation that shows us how much we actually engage in those unhelpful
Mm-hmm.
thought patterns. And so once we become aware of it, the challenge is to notice and interrupt that tendency to do that. And eventually, you might see yourself putting fewer dollars in the bowl. And I'm telling you, I challenged myself and I so far can't say I've ever made it through a day without complaining about something. And and so I would challenge you all
Yeah.
to test your ability to do that. There's another person I follow. Her name is Patty Lennon, and she's an intuitive, and she challenged people to go on a complaining detox. Try it for five
Ooh.
days. Just try it for 5 days. And she actually made a statement that really helped me conceptualize it. So, complaining is complaining if you find yourself repetitively complaining about the same things, if you suddenly hear yourself doing it all the time, or it
Mm-hmm.
becomes kind of circular thinking, when you can shift that to solution seeking, it's no longer complaining.
Or even shifting it to a gratitude,
Yes,
like finding the gratitude in like the, worst situations that you would find
right,
that you would normally find yourself complaining about.
right,
Yeah.
right. And so if you can say, okay, I'm naming this problem. And I know this is something I want to work on. And then you begin to seek solutions,
Mm-hmm.
do some problem solving, do some planning, uh, figure out what tools you have at your disposal. Then you can shift your mindset. And I think that we have to do this on a daily basis.
Yes.
We're on a journey that we're we're on a journey. We don't arrive and be done. It's
Right.
something that we have to do every day.
It's literally taking time each day to do the important tasks. And that does not mean doing the dishes and the laundry. Yes, those are important tasks, but we're talking about mindset shifting types of tasks, meditation, journaling, visualization, sound healing, if that's what you need, taking time to get your exercise in, things like that. That's how you shift your mindset.
Those things help us ground ourselves in our experience rather than
Mm-hmm.
letting our experience manage us. We all affect
Each other.
everyone around us.
Mm-hmm.
And right now in our world, we need this kindness, this
Mm-hmm.
acceptance more than ever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think if I wanted to kind of sum this up, I mean, this again is one of my favorite topics. And I think Darian has my email link and YouTube and something. But if you want to work with me on this, this is one of my specialty things to work with folks on. And it's something that I really enjoy talking about endlessly, is breaking up with this victim mindset. But if I can give you one thing to go with, it's just, do what you can to create your own awareness around what, like Darian said, what am I blaming? What am I complaining about? What am I shaming or shoulds or all of these things that we feel like we're doing in, the day to day, or if we're not even aware of it. The easiest way to break up with your victimhood is to create an awareness around the fact that you're in that mindset, because we all are to some extent, some of us more than others, and that's okay.
Do you want to recite your quote again for this episode as we close, Sarah?
I can. The quote is, "You are here in this time and in this space for a unique purpose."
I encourage you all to explore what your unique purpose is. And thank you for joining us today, Sarah. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Darian.
We'll see you all again in June for another episode of Get What You Need and Feel Good About It. Take care. Thank you for joining me today on Get What You Need and Feel Good About It. Remember, when you speak up for yourself assertively, you will get what you need and feel good about it. You will also be showing respect for yourself and for the other people in your life who are important to you. Until next time, try thinking about it like Stephanie LaHart says it. Say what you mean what you say, but don't say it mean. Before it gets too late and the